It was September 29th, the year 2025. Somewhere between the damp earth and the first light, an army believed it could hold the line with brute force alone. But war no longer obeys the old gods of fire and noise. It listens now to algorithms and satellites, to coordinates whispered across invisible skies. These modern military equipment are not just tools, they are decisions made in seconds, colder and sharper than any blade forged by hand. When the first bird rose above the canopy, the forest trembled, and within minutes, what began as confidence turned into static, smoke, and silence. What happens when the giants of steel meet the ghosts of precision? Subscribe, not just for a story, but for a lesson written in fire and precision. They arrived before midnight. The convoy stretched like a metal serpent through the Kursk woods, its tracks sinking deep into the wet soil. The air was thick with diesel and exhaustion. North Korean engineers moved with mechanical discipline, laying camouflage nets that clung to the branches like cobwebs. Each vehicle was parked at precise angles of sounding, triangular formation. Pre-war doctrine still followed as gospel. To them, the KOKSAN M1978 was not a relic. It was pride forged in the iron will of a generation that had survived famine and fear. The young gunners patted its thick barrel as if it were a living beast, whispering fragments of songs about Pyongyang's hills. They believed that range meant safety itself, that distance itself was armor. Commander Ryu, barely 30, studied his map beneath the dim red glow of a lantern. His orders were clear: hold position until the Russians arrive. He did not question the lack of radar or air defense. In his mind, the forest was protection enough. He did not see the truth hidden in the dark. The forest was a mirror, reflecting every spark of heat, every metallic breath to the eyes above the clouds. Silence wrapped around them. The sound of a cigarette being lit echoed like gunfire. Somewhere, an owl called once, then fled. The gunners took it as a sign of good luck. Ryu marked the coordinates, adjusted his watch, and gave the order to begin loading. One by one, the shells were lifted into the breach, each weighing more than a man, each promising thunder. The crews worked rhythmically, a ritual older than most of them. Their voices merged with the hum of engines, with the groan of hydraulics. To an observer, it would have seemed like a well-rehearsed symphony of discipline and might. But beneath that choreography lay a fatal illusion. The age of giants was already over. They simply did not know it yet. Above the mist, a Leica reconnaissance drone was already circling, its sensors gliding through the fog like a patient hunter tracing the breath of its prey. The old giant stood ready to fire. The sky, however, was no longer theirs. Far to the south, beyond the frost-bitten horizon, the command shelter near Sumi hummed softly beneath layers of camouflage netting. Inside, 4 figures sat before a wall of pale blue screens, their faces illuminated by ghost light. They were not soldiers in the traditional sense. No helmets, no mud, no smoke. Their battlefield existed within pixels and coordinates. Altitude 300 meters. Adjusting thermal lens. The voice belonged to Sergeant Havel, the youngest of the reconnaissance team. His hands trembled slightly on the controller, not from fear, but from precision. The Leica 100 UAV drifted forward, slicing through the fog above Kursk like a silent scalpel. Its wings formed an M shape, its body no larger than a seagull. "Target zone acquired," he whispered. On the monitor, faint heat signatures blossomed beneath the trees. 15, maybe 20 men. 3 massive rectangles glowed brighter, the KOKSAN batteries. Static crackled as Havel zoomed in. The outlines of helmets, the gleam of metal, even the flicker of a cigarette tipper. Each pixel told a story. No radar pings, no anti-air patterns. The forest was blind. Lieutenant Vaha leaned forward, eyes narrowing. No Panzer, no Tor. There, naked. He tapped a key, marking the grid. The cursor blinked twice, sending encrypted data down a narrow UHF channel toward the artillery command. In that instant, technology shrank the world, one breath in Kursk, one heartbeat in Sumy, and a line of numbers deciding life and death between them. The team spoke little. They did not cheer or curse. Their language was code. Their faith was accuracy. Outside, the wind rattled the shelter like distant thunder. "Signal locked," Havel said quietly. "Transmitting to HIMARS battery." A pause. "Confirmed," Vaha replied. "Target priority. High value. Initiate Operation Needle." The drone banked east, maintaining altitude. Below, the forest shimmered with faint ripples of heat, unaware of the eye above it. To the men inside the UAV cabin, the screen was both a window and a mirror house. It showed the enemy, but also reflected what they had become. Watchers, silent and omnipotent, yet bound to the weight of every strike they called. For a brief second, the drone's camera caught something unexpected. A North Korean soldier looking straight up, as if sensing the invisible. His expression was unreadable, a mix of fatigue and fate. Then, the image froze, stabilized, and the coordinates locked in amber light. The eyes above had seen enough. Now, the fire below would begin. At 04,025, the forest was still asleep, drenched in the silver breath of dawn. But 60 kilometers away, the first HIMARS battery had already awakened. Inside a camouflage launcher stationed near Sumy, the crew moved in silence, their gestures rehearsed 100 times. No words, only numbers, only rhythm. Elevation 53 degrees. Coordinates locked. Fire mission, 3 rockets, M30A1. The commander's voice was calm, almost detached. It was the calm of mathematics, not emotion. He looked once at the digital map, Kursk. Grid 7265. A small triangle flickering like a heartbeat. Then he nodded. Launch. The first rocket leapt into the sky with a sound that tore the world open. A streak of fire, a trail of purpose. Within seconds, it climbed 11,000 meters, slicing through the cold layers of air. On board, the M-code GPS adjusted its course by millimeters, responding to live corrections from the drone above Kursk House. The eye and the blade working as one. In the control room, the monitors flashed. Impact in 30. Avalek, the UAV operator, watched from miles away. On his screen, the forest glowed in infrared. The first explosion came not with thunder, but with light a bloom of tungsten fragments scattering like a metallic storm. He saw one truck vanish in a flash of orange. The feed jittered, then stabilized. Direct hit, he whispered. The second rocket followed 20 seconds later, diving at an oblique angle. It struck 3 meters wide of the central gun, yet the concussion ripped open the tracks and silenced the cannon. The third came soon after, a spear descending straight through the morning fog. When it hit, the forest convulsed, a pulse of fire rolling outward like breath from a dying god. 90 seconds. That was all it took. Where there had been an army, now there was wreckage. 3 artillery pieces shredded, ammunition burning like falling stars. The camera feed blurred with static, then cleared to reveal twisted steel and motionless silhouettes. In the HIMARS cabin, the commander gave a single order, move. Engines roared, wheels turned, and within 2 minutes, the launcher disappeared into the mist. No triumph, no celebration, just efficiency. A ghost strike already gone before its echo reached the tree line. Back in the forest, Commander Ryu staggered from the smoke, clutching a burned sleeve. His radio hissed, dead. The air reeked of cordite and grief. Around him, the giants had fallen, silent, unrecognizable. He looked upward once more. The sky was still pale, untouched, as if nothing had happened at all. These modern military equipment had rewritten the laws of war, not through sheer power, but through silence, precision, and time itself. The age of thunder had ended. The era of the scalpel had begun. When the echoes faded, only the wind remained. The forest that had once shuddered with the breath of engines was now a field of silence. The air smelled of scorched metal and pine resin. Smoke drifted through the treetops in thin grey ribbons, curling like memories refusing to die. Among the wreckage, fragments of uniforms fluttered like wilted flags. The twisted hull of a KOKSAN gun jutted from the mud, its barrel bent downward, as if bowing to the inevitable. Nearby, a soldier's watch ticked faintly, its glass cracked, but still alive, marking seconds that no longer belonged to anyone. Commander Ryu crawled from beneath the ruins of his vehicle, his face blackened with soot, his hearing drowned by the roar that had passed. Around him, the world was unrecognizable. The men he had commanded, voices, laughter, the steady rhythm of drills, all replaced by the whisper of burning oil. He stumbled toward a clearing and saw the crater where his command truck had been. Inside the crater, the metal had melted into a single pool of dull silver. For the first time, he understood what they had truly faced. It had not been a bombardment. It had been a surgery swift, exact, merciless. The forest had been dissected, not destroyed. From above, the drone continued to circle, its camera tracing the aftermath like an unblinking witness. Havel sat back in his chair, hands trembling slightly. He zoomed in one last time ago on the figure of Ryu standing alone amidst the wreckage, staring at something only he could see. Then he turned off the feed. Miles away, in the HIMARS convoy, the commander filed his report, mission complete. 3 targets neutralized, and returning to standby. His tone was neutral, almost routine. Yet, as the vehicle moved through the fog, he glanced once into the mirror. For a heartbeat, he thought he saw faces in the drifting smoke, shapes that lingered and then dissolved. Back in Kursk, the wind carried the scent of fuel and damp earth. The birds did not return. The forest had become a museum of silence, where modern precision had met ancient pride and rewritten it into ash. When the Ukrainian artillery command reviewed the footage hours later, they marked the operation as a textbook success. But in the quiet corners of the control room, no one smiled. They knew that, for every coordinate struck, a memory vanished, a story erased before it could be told. Steel had no memory, yet the Earth remembered everything. Thousands of kilometers away, the world watched in silence. News feeds from Moscow were sterile, official, and muted. Yet somewhere in Pyongyang, the story was told differently. The Central Television broadcast a special program, Return of the Fallen. The screen opened with the crimson of flags and the white of mourning bands. Rows of caskets draped in national colors lined a marble hall under soft yellow light. The air was still, heavy with orchestrated grief. Cameras panned slowly across the scene until they found him Mayo, Kim Jong-un, standing before the first coffin. His uniform was immaculate, yet his face looked years older. He stepped forward, placed the flag over the lid with both hands, and held it there, as if to keep the spirit from leaving. His lips moved, but no sound emerged. The hall was silent, except for the faint hum of cameras and the distant sobs of mothers allowed to weep only when the frame permitted. For a moment, the leader bowed his head. It was brief, almost imperceptible, but for the watching world, it was enough. A rare fracture in the mask of power. Outside, the city lights flickered across the Taedong River. On the news ticker below, the words "heroic sacrifice in Kursk" scrolled endlessly. But beyond the slogans, the truth was clear. The artillery that had once symbolized pride had become a monument to obsolescence. KOKSAN guns, the long arm of the revolution, were relics crushed by mathematics and precision. In Kiev, the same night, analysts reviewed the footage and spoke in measured tones of tactical efficiency. To them, it was data, coordinates, ranges, and probabilities. To others, it was a quiet revelation that in modern war, victory had lost its roar. It whispered now, in codes and digital ghosts. The echo of Kursk was not the explosion, it was the silence that followed the collective realization that humanity had built weapons so precise they left no space for courage, only calculation. As dawn broke over the Dnipro River, a single line appeared on the mission board, Operation Needle Estasis. 0 casualties, 0. A perfect number, a hollow one. Back in Pyongyang, the cameras cut to black. The broadcast ended with the image of a flag, half folded, frozen in mid-air, a gesture both proud and powerless. Somewhere between the silence of Kursk and the applause of politics, the truth lingered like smoke. Modern warfare had become an equation solved too well, and the cost of its perfection was the soul of those who waged it. The night had long surrendered to dawn, yet Kursk remained grayer, its soil still holding the warmth of what had burned. The mist returned, as if to hide the scars, to cover the silence left behind by a battle that lasted less than 2 minutes. The forest would grow again, the steel would rust, but the lesson would remain. In this new age of war, numbers move faster than men. Satellites speak before soldiers do. Victory is no longer measured in territory gained, but in milliseconds and data streams. The line between courage and calculation has thinned to almost nothing. When historians one day write about Kursk, they may call it a small battle, a minor note in a long war. But for those who watched, it was something else entirely, a turning point, when the weight of human will bowed before the logic of precision. Modern conflict is no longer about the roar of guns, but about the silence that follows, the click of encryption, the hum of guidance systems, the pulse of unseen choices. It is a world where military equipment does not simply serve man, but defines the rhythm of his decisions. And yet, within every machine, there is still the echo of the hand that built it, the eyes that guided it, the heart that hesitated for a single second before pressing fire. Military equipment may change sleeker, smarter, deadlier, but it can never erase the truth that war, in any century, remains a mirror. It reflects who we are, not what we hold. So perhaps the lesson of Kursk is not about superiority, but humility. That in our race for perfect precision, we risk forgetting the imperfect souls who bear its cost. Military equipment alone will never define a nation's courage, nor its destiny. It is the wisdom behind the weapon, the restraint behind the trigger, that determines whether we rise as guardians or fall as ghosts. Between peace and fire, the choice has never been more precise. Peace, Fordum. The forest of Kursk was still breathing in mist when the dawn refused to rise. Beneath its silver veil, engines whispered Dana, a convoy of old steel giants, their barrels pointing west, their crews unaware that history had already turned the page.